The grand hall of the mansion was suffused with the soft glow of afternoon sunlight filtering through the towering windows, casting long shadows across the polished marble floors. Crystal chandeliers hung from the ceiling, their facets catching the light and scattering it in delicate rainbows around the room. A fire crackled gently in the ornate hearth, its warmth contrasting with the chill in the air that had settled ever since the unexpected visitor had arrived. The millionaire stood near the center of the hall, his tailored suit impeccable, but his posture stiff with disbelief. His eyes, sharp and calculating in business meetings, now flickered with confusion and something deeper, an unsettled emotion that unsettled even him. He had been expecting a simple delivery, a routine meeting with his estate manager, yet instead before him stood a little girl, no older than 7, dressed in worn clothes that looked utterly out of place amidst the opulence surrounding her. She was small, her frame slight and fragile, with tangled chestnut hair framing a face marked by both innocence and quiet despair. Her large eyes, the color of storm clouds, darted nervously around the room, absorbing every detail. The glistening surfaces, the heavy curtains, the countless artifacts that spoke of wealth and power. Yet despite the grandeur, her expression was distant, almost as if she were somewhere else entirely. The tension in the room was palpable. The millionaire took a cautious step forward, his voice steady but gentle as he finally broke the silence. "Who are you, child? And how did you come to be here?" The girl's gaze met his briefly before dropping to the floor. Her voice was barely above a whisper, yet it carried a weight that seemed to fill the cavernous space. "This isn't my home." The words hung between them like a fragile glass ornament, teetering on the edge of a shelf. They were simple, yet profound, instantly unsettling the man's carefully constructed world. He blinked, trying to process what he had just heard. The girl's declaration challenged everything he assumed about the space, about ownership, and about belonging itself. He opened his mouth, but no words came out. The room, once vibrant with the hum of life and luxury, now felt suspended in time, as if the very walls were holding their breath. The girl's small frame trembled, and she took a tentative step back, as though preparing to retreat from the confrontation her words had ignited. The millionaire, regaining some composure, motioned toward a nearby velvet armchair. "Please sit down. Let's talk. You must have a story. There must be a reason you're here." Hesitating, the girl moved slowly toward the chair, her movements tentative and unsure. Once seated, she folded her hands in her lap, eyes fixed on the floor. The silence stretched again, heavy and expectant, as the man studied her carefully. He noted the dirt smudges on her sleeves, the threadbare fabric of her dress, and the way her fingers fidgeted nervously. "Tell me," he urged softly, "where do you come from? Why do you say this isn't your home?" The girl's lips parted, and a faint quiver shook her voice as she began. "I don't belong here. I don't have a place like this. Where I'm from, it's different. It's not shiny or big. It's small and messy, but it's where I'm supposed to be." Her eyes lifted to meet his, searching for understanding. "Here everything is so strange. And I don't know why I'm here with you." His heart, so used to business deals and calculated risks, now felt something unfamiliar. A prickling sensation of empathy, mingled with confusion and a touch of guilt. He glanced around the room as if seeing it anew, not as his domain but as a backdrop to a story he had yet to grasp. "What's your name?" he asked quietly. "Emma," she replied. "Emma," he repeated, the name lingering between them like a fragile bridge. "And how did you find your way here, Emma?" She swallowed hard, as if the answer was painful. "I don't remember exactly. I just know I was told this place is important, that someone here might be able to help me. But I don't know who that someone is." For a moment the millionaire was silent, his mind racing through possibilities and unanswered questions. The mansion, with all its grandeur, suddenly felt hollow, an empty shell that had never been meant to hold a child like Emma. He had lived here for years, surrounded by wealth yet isolated in his own way. And now this small girl's presence shattered the illusion of control he had always maintained. Emma's story, though sparse, hinted at a vulnerability that tugged at something deep inside him. He noticed how the girl's shoulders slumped slightly, as if the weight of her unspoken past was too heavy to carry alone. Despite the luxury around her, she seemed displaced, a fragile fragment lost in a world that was not built for her. He took another step closer, lowering his voice to a soothing tone. "You're safe here. Promise. We'll figure this out together." Her eyes widened with a flicker of hope, but the guarded look remained. "I don't want to be a stranger here," she whispered. "I want to belong somewhere." The millionaire nodded slowly, acknowledging the truth in her words. This moment, this quiet confession in the heart of his mansion, was no longer about possessions or status. It was about something far more fundamental: belonging. The day wore on, shadows lengthening as the sun dipped lower. Yet the mansion, for all its grandeur, had become a place suspended between worlds. Emma sat quietly, her small frame dwarfed by the vastness around her, while the millionaire wrestled with the unexpected weight of her presence. He realized that this was no ordinary encounter. The little girl's whispered words, "This isn't my home," had laid bare a fracture in his world, one he could neither ignore nor easily mend. The questions were many, and the answers elusive, but beneath it all was the undeniable truth. A connection had been forged, fragile yet undeniable. As evening crept in, the millionaire found himself standing by the window, gazing out at the sprawling estate that had once symbolized his success and security. Now it felt like a labyrinth, full of mysteries and untold stories. Emma's voice echoed in his mind, haunting and persistent. "This isn't my home." Those words would not be forgotten. They would shape the days to come, challenging the millionaire to confront not only the little girl's past but his own loneliness and the true meaning of belonging. Days passed in a quiet rhythm within the mansion's walls, each one peeling back layers of silence and hesitation that had settled between the millionaire and Emma. The vastness of the estate, once intimidating and cold, began to soften as the girl tentatively explored its corners, her small footsteps echoing against gilded corridors and polished floors. She moved with a cautious curiosity, as if testing the boundaries of this unfamiliar world, trying to reconcile the opulence with the fragile sense of self she carried inside. Emma's past, once a mere whisper in the shadowed corners of her mind, slowly began to surface in fragments, scattered pieces of memory that flickered like distant stars in a dark sky. She spoke little at first, her words guarded and hesitant, but the millionaire listened with growing patience, sensing the weight behind each carefully chosen phrase. "I grew up in a place far from here," she said one afternoon, sitting on the edge of a sunlit window seat, her knees drawn close to her chest. "It wasn't like this. It was noisy, cramped. People didn't have much, but they had each other. It was messy and loud, but I belonged there. At least I thought so." The millionaire sat across from her, the polished wood of the antique table between them a stark contrast to the raw simplicity of her story. His own life had been a study in contrasts, privilege wrapped in solitude, wealth shadowed by isolation. He found himself reflecting on the walls of his mansion, the countless possessions amassed over decades, and the emptiness that sometimes echoed louder than the grandeur. "I never understood that feeling before," he admitted quietly, "of not belonging. I have everything I could want, but I've always felt apart, like an observer rather than a participant." Emma's eyes flickered with something almost like understanding, a fragile bridge forming between their disparate worlds. "Maybe that's why you're here," she whispered. "Maybe that's why I am." Their conversations became a tentative dance, each revealing slivers of their truths while navigating the unspoken fears that lingered beneath the surface. The millionaire, once accustomed to control and certainty, began to surrender to the uncertainty Emma's presence brought. He found himself asking questions he hadn't dared to voice before. About loneliness, about the human need for connection, about the possibility of change. Emma, too, grappled with the strange dichotomy of her new surroundings. The mansion's elegance was both enchanting and alien, a world apart from the gritty reality she had known. She noticed the care taken in every detail, the soft fabrics, the delicate china, the quiet servants who moved like shadows, but none of it could erase the sense of displacement that clung to her like a second skin. One afternoon, as rain pattered softly against the tall windows, Emma confided in him a memory that had haunted her. "There was a night when I thought no one cared I was gone, when I thought I wasn't anyone's child anymore." Her voice trembled, the vulnerability raw and unfiltered. "I want to believe you care, that I'm not just a stranger here." The millionaire reached out, hesitating for a moment before resting his hand gently over hers. "You're not a stranger, Emma. You're more than that. You're a person who deserves to be seen, to be heard, to belong. The shift in their relationship was subtle but profound. Trust, fragile and tentative, began to take root. Emma's eyes, once wary and guarded, started to reveal glimpses of hope and tentative warmth. And the millionaire, for all his years of success and solitude, rediscovered a capacity for empathy that had long been dormant. Their days became punctuated by small rituals. Afternoon tea shared quietly in the drawing room, walks through the estate's sprawling gardens where Emma marveled at the colors and scents foreign to her past, evenings by the fireplace where stories were exchanged in low voices. Each moment chipped away at the barriers between their worlds, weaving a fragile tapestry of connection. Yet, beneath the surface, the complexities remained. Emma's cautious steps forward were shadowed by a fear of rejection, a lingering question of whether she truly belonged in a place so far removed from everything she had known. The millionaire, too, wrestled with his own doubts, wondering if he could bridge the gulf between privilege and pain, wealth and want. One evening, as twilight deepened and the mansion's lights cast a warm glow, the millionaire found himself watching Emma as she sat near the grand piano, her fingers tracing the keys without playing. The contrast was striking, the delicate beauty of the music room against the quiet turmoil in her eyes. He approached slowly, unsure of what to say, and finally spoke with a tenderness that surprised even him. "You don't have to pretend here. You can be yourself, no matter what that means." Emma looked up, her gaze steady now, a flicker of something like trust shining through. "It's hard," she admitted. "But maybe with time this place can be more than just a house. Maybe it can be home." The millionaire nodded, the weight of her words settling between them. In that moment, the mansion ceased to be merely a symbol of wealth and power. It became a space of possibility, fragile yet real. Their relationship, once defined by distance and difference, began to evolve into something deeper. A tentative bond forged through shared vulnerability and the courage to face the unknown together. Emma's presence challenged the millionaire to reconsider not only his life but the very nature of family, identity, and belonging. As the days unfolded, the mansion's walls bore silent witness to this transformation. The echoes of laughter slowly crept in, mingling with moments of quiet reflection. The clash between Emma's past and the millionaire's world no longer seemed insurmountable, but rather a complex tapestry waiting to be woven into something new. The journey was far from over, and the road ahead was uncertain, but for the first time in a long while, both Emma and the millionaire glimpsed a future where connection might triumph over isolation. The fragile trust they had begun to build offered a tentative promise that in this opulent yet unfamiliar world, two very different lives might find a way to intersect and grow together. The quiet progress they had made was suddenly fractured one late afternoon when the millionaire, searching through a forgotten drawer in his study, uncovered a faded photograph tucked beneath a stack of old letters. The image was sepia-toned and worn, depicting a young woman holding a child, her eyes hauntingly familiar. As he stared, the layers of his carefully compartmentalized life began to unravel, revealing truths he had buried deep, truths that now confronted him with brutal clarity. His breath caught in his throat as recognition dawned. The woman was his late sister, a figure he had mourned quietly but distantly, and the child, could it be? The resemblance was unmistakable. The realization hit him like a thunderclap. Emma's presence was no coincidence. She was connected to his past in ways he had not dared to imagine. That evening the mansion felt heavier, the air thick with unspoken questions. Emma sat quietly in the drawing room, watching as the millionaire paced restlessly, the photograph clutched in his hand. Finally, unable to contain the turmoil within, he called her over. "Emma," he said, his voice low but steady, "there's something I need to show you." He handed her the photograph, watching as her eyes traced the faces frozen in time. A flicker of recognition crossed her features, followed by a shadow of pain. "That's my mother," she whispered, voice trembling. The room seemed to shrink around them as the walls bore silent witness to the fragile unraveling of their intertwined histories. Emma's expression hardened slightly, a defense mechanism rising to shield her from the vulnerability of the moment. "You knew about this," she accused softly, the hurt beneath her words palpable. "Why didn't you tell me? Why did you let me believe I was just a stranger here?" The millionaire's jaw tightened, guilt and regret warring within him. "I was afraid of what it would mean for you, for me. I didn't want to open wounds that neither of us were ready to face. Emma's eyes flashed with a mixture of anger and sorrow. You kept me at arm's length, pretending I was just a visitor. But I needed to know the truth. I needed to know if I belonged. The tension between them was electric. A collision of past pain and present vulnerability. Their dialogue was raw, exposing cracks in the fragile trust they had painstakingly built. Emma's voice wavered as she pressed further, demanding answers about her origins and the circumstances that had led her to this mansion. The millionaire, burdened by years of silence and denial, began to reveal the hidden chapters of his family history. The heartbreaks, the mistakes, the secrets kept in shadows. He spoke of his sister's struggles, the choices she had made, and the legacy left behind. A legacy that now included Emma. As the truth spilled into the room, both felt the weight of their shared history pressing down. Emma's initial anger softened, replaced by a tentative understanding of the complexity that had shaped their lives. Yet, the path forward was fraught with uncertainty. As they grappled with the implications of their newfound connection, they negotiated boundaries cautiously, each seeking to protect themselves while opening the door to healing. Emma asserted her need for honesty and respect, refusing to be defined solely by the past, while the millionaire pledged to support her without imposing expectations. In the days that followed, the mansion became a crucible of emotion and confrontation. Conversations oscillated between moments of painful honesty and tentative hope. They challenged one another's assumptions, revealing vulnerabilities that had long been hidden beneath facades of strength. The millionaire wrestled with his own guilt. Had he failed Emma by not embracing her sooner? Had his fear of the past deprived them both of the chance for true connection? Emma, in turn, confronted her fears of abandonment and rejection, questioning whether she could trust this man who had suddenly become central to her life. Despite the turmoil, they found moments of grace. Shared silences that spoke volumes, tentative touches that bridged the emotional distance, and glimpses of a future where their fractured pasts might be reconciled. Their relationship, once defined by uncertainty and guarded hope, began to evolve into a complex tapestry woven from threads of honesty, pain, and the fragile promise of acceptance. The mansion, with all its grandeur, now echoed with the sounds of two souls struggling to find common ground. The journey was far from easy, and the scars of their history were raw and visible. Yet, in facing the painful truths, they planted the seeds of a bond that might one day grow beyond the shadows of their past. The millionaire and Emma stood at a crossroads, poised between the weight of what had been and the possibilities of what could be, their connection both fragile and fiercely real. Days had turned into weeks since the truths had surfaced, and the mansion, once a silent witness to uncertainty and guarded hearts, now hummed quietly with the fragile beginnings of acceptance. The millionaire, who had lived so long behind walls of privilege and solitude, found himself embracing Emma not merely as a guest or a shadow of the past, but as someone who belonged irrespective of bloodlines or wealth. It was an unspoken shift, a gradual unraveling of doubt and fear that had tightened like a noose around them both. Emma's cautious steps had become strides of tentative confidence, her laughter more frequent and less tinged with hesitation. The mansion's grand rooms, once echoing with emptiness, now seemed filled with the warmth of belonging. One afternoon, as the sun filtered softly through the lace curtains of the drawing room, the millionaire sat beside Emma on a worn leather sofa. They shared a quiet moment, the kind that needed no words, a simple presence, a tether of trust between two souls who had weathered storms together. Outside, the estate's garden stretched endlessly, a tapestry of vibrant blooms and whispering trees. It was here, beneath the sprawling branches of an ancient oak, that they had first walked side by side, sharing stories of loss and hope. Those walks had become a ritual, a bridge between their worlds, and a testament to the bond growing stronger with each passing day. Together, they faced the external challenges that sought to test their fragile connection. There were questions from distant relatives who saw Emma as an intruder, whispers among staff uncertain of her place in the grand design. Yet, through it all, the millionaire stood firmly beside her, a silent guardian who refused to let the past dictate the future. Emma, too, found strength in the support that had once seemed unimaginable. She confronted her own fears of rejection, of not being enough, and slowly, the walls she had built began to crumble. The mansion, with all its grandeur, was no longer a fortress of isolation, but a haven where she could be seen and accepted. One evening, as twilight painted the sky in hues of purple and gold, they gathered in the great hall. The atmosphere was warm, filled with quiet celebration. A small gathering of trusted friends and family who had come to recognize the new family being forged within these walls. Emma stood beside the millionaire, her eyes bright with emotion. She spoke softly, her voice steady despite the tremor of vulnerability beneath. "I never thought I'd find a place where I truly belonged, but here with you I feel at home." The millionaire nodded, his gaze steady and full of unspoken promises. "You belong here, Emma. Not because of anything you have or don't have, but because of who you are." Their words hung in the air, a testament to the journey they had undertaken. From strangers to family, from uncertainty to acceptance. The mansion, once a symbol of isolation and separation, now embodied something richer and more profound, a home. In the days that followed, the rhythms of their life settled into a new normal. There were mornings filled with shared breakfasts and quiet conversations, afternoons spent tending the gardens or exploring new corners of the estate, and evenings illuminated by the soft glow of the fireplace where stories of the past and dreams for the future intertwined. The millionaire found himself reflecting on the transformation, not just of the mansion but of his own heart. The presence of Emma had forced him to confront his fears and prejudices, to embrace vulnerability and the messy, beautiful complexity of human connection. Emma, in turn, discovered a strength she had never known. The mansion, with all its history and grandeur, was no longer a place where she felt out of place but a sanctuary where she could grow and belong. Their family, once fractured and uncertain, was now whole, not defined by blood or wealth, but by understanding, compassion, and the deliberate choice to stay. One quiet evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and the first stars appeared, Emma looked up at the millionaire and asked, "Will you stay?" His smile was gentle and sure. "I'm here. I'm staying." In that moment, the mansion breathed with life and hope. The past, with all its shadows, no longer held dominion over them. Instead, they stood together, a new family forged in truth and acceptance, ready to face whatever the future might bring. The story of Emma and the millionaire was no longer one of loss and displacement but of renewal and belonging, a testament to the power of truth, the resilience of the human heart, and the hope found in choosing to come home. If you loved the story, like the video and subscribe.